Welcome to the Partardez channel. Today, we explain Prophets Kings 2, chapter 16 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
So, what really happens when a king literally sells out his nation's holiest site just to appease a massive, aggressive foreign empire? Well, that's exactly what we're going to see unfold today. We are walking through the entire 16th chapter of 2 Kings, verse by verse. We're looking at a deeply consequential moment in history here, a time where immense geopolitical pressure collides with a total, absolute collapse of spiritual integrity. We're going to see step by step what happens when a young king faces a terrifying military crisis and decides his best strategy is to just compromise everything that makes his nation unique. To make sure we don't miss a single detail, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the reign of King Ahaz, then look at his desperate Assyrian alliance. After that, we'll cover the altar of Damascus, the stripping of the Holy Temple, pull out some practical lessons, and finish up with a quick recap. Let's jump right into Section 1, the reign of King Ahaz.
All right, let's open up the text to verse 1, which perfectly sets our chronological stage. The text tells us that in the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Ramaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Now, just for some quick context, Pekah is currently the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Ahaz is taking the throne down south in the kingdom of Judah, right in Jerusalem. Verse 2 gives us his vital stats. Ahaz was just 20 years old when he became king, and he ended up reigning for 16 years.
Right off the bat, the text doesn't pull any punches. Verse 2 tells us directly that unlike his ancestor David, Ahaz did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. The contrast here is incredibly stark. Verse 3 explains that instead of following David's righteous path, Ahaz walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He followed the detestable ways of the nations the Lord had driven out. And then the text hits us with a horrifying specific detail. He even sacrificed his own son, making him pass through the fire. I mean, this is a complete fundamental departure from the core values of his entire heritage.
Real quick, before we read verse 4, it's really important to remember how we're approaching this text. We are using the Peshat method. That just means we're looking at the plain, literal meaning of the text in its historical context. We aren't hunting for deep, hidden allegories or Kabbalistic symbolism here. So when verse 4 says that Ahaz offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places, on the hilltops, and under every spreading and leafy tree, we take that literally. He was physically going out to these unauthorized pagan worship sites all over the land and personally participating in outright idolatry. He was blatantly violating the core commandments.
Moving right along into Section 2, the Assyrian alliance.
So all this idolatry we just talked about, it isn't happening in a vacuum. In verses 5 and 6, the geopolitical tension completely explodes. Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the king of Israel, actually form an alliance and march up to fight against Jerusalem. They lay siege to King Ahaz. Now, the text notes they couldn't fully overpower him inside Jerusalem itself, but they inflict serious, serious damage on his kingdom. Verse 6 tells us that around this time, Rezin recovered the city of Elath for Aram by driving out the men of Judah, and the Edomites moved in. So picture this. Ahaz is actively losing territory, and his capital city is totally surrounded by two hostile armies. He's cornered. Now here is where it gets wild. You'd think, okay, time to repent, time to turn to God for help, right? That's what his righteous ancestors would have done. But not Ahaz. In verse 7, he turns to a foreign superpower instead. He sends messengers to the king of Assyria with a completely subservient message. He literally says, "I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and out of the hand of the king of Israel, who rise up against me." He is voluntarily surrendering the independence of Judah. He is declaring himself a vassal, a mere servant to Assyria. And the guy receiving this desperate plea, that's Tiglath-Pileser, the fiercely powerful king of the rapidly expanding Assyrian empire. But, words of submission aren't nearly enough to buy an entire empire's army. Ahaz needs a massive bribe. Verse 8 tells us exactly how he funded this alliance. Ahaz actually took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord, as well as the treasuries of his own royal palace, and sent it all as a gift to the king of Assyria. He literally empties out the sacred and royal wealth of his entire nation just to buy his own immediate short-term safety. And, well, it works. In verse 9, we see the immediate, literal results of this massive payout. Tiglath-Pileser accepts the bribe and attacks Damascus, the capital of Aram. He captures the city, deports its inhabitants to Kir as captives, and puts King Rezin to death. Just like that,
the immediate military threat to Ahaz is completely dismantled by the Assyrian war machine. That brings us to Section 3, the altar of Damascus, because this rescue came with a massive spiritual cost.
Let's walk step by step through verses 10 and 11. Now that Ahaz is a vassal to Assyria, step 1 is that he travels to Damascus to formally pay his respects to his new overlord, Tiglath-Pileser. Step 2, while he's there, he sees this grand foreign altar in Damascus and is completely captivated by it. Step 3 is almost hard to believe. He literally draws up blueprints. He sends a sketch of the altar with detailed plans of its fashion and workmanship back home to Jerusalem. And step 4, the construction begins immediately based on the king's exact design, and it's totally finished before Ahaz even gets back from Damascus.
So you might be wondering, who exactly is back home managing this massive architectural change at the Holy Temple while the king is away? The text introduces us to Uriah the priest. He's the high priest. He is the religious authority in Jerusalem. You'd expect him to put up some resistance, right? Nope. Verse 11 makes it incredibly clear that Uriah offered zero pushback. The text says Uriah the priest built the altar in accordance with all the plans King Ahaz sent from Damascus. He makes it ready against the coming of the king. The religious leadership completely and totally caves to the political leadership's idolatrous demands.
When King Ahaz finally returns in verses 12 through 14, he doesn't just admire his brand new altar, he completely takes over the service. The king approaches the replica and personally offers his burnt offering and grain offering. He pours out his drink offering and dashes the blood of his peace offerings against it. But the most shocking detail is right there in verse 14. What happens to the original, sacred brazen altar that was before the Lord? Ahaz physically moves it out of the way. He drags it from the front of the house, from between his new altar and the house of the Lord, and shoves it off to the north side. He literally sidelines God's holy altar just to make room for his foreign-inspired replica.
And the crucial thing to understand here is that this wasn't just a one-time publicity stunt. It's a permanent change in temple protocol. In verse 15, Ahaz gives Uriah the priest his standing orders. From now on, the morning burnt offering and the evening meal offering for both the king and all the people must be offered upon this new great altar. All the blood of the sacrifices has to be dashed against it. And as for the original brazen altar, Ahaz casually says, it shall be for him to look to, meaning he's just keeping it around as a relic, or maybe to inquire by. It's totally secondary now. And verse 16 confirms that Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz ordered, every single thing.
Section 4, stripping the holy temple. As if redesigning the altar wasn't destructive enough, verses 17 and 18 detail the physical dismantling of the temple complex itself. In verse 17, the text describes Ahaz literally hacking away at the beautiful, intricate metalwork of the temple. He cut off the borders of the movable bases and removed the lavers, those are the washing basins, from them. He also targeted what's called the sea. This was a massive, magnificent bronze water basin used by the priests, and it originally rested on the backs of 12 bronze oxen. Ahaz physically takes down this massive sea from off the brazen oxen and just plops it down on a plain stone base. He is methodically stripping the temple of its glory. And verse 18 shows us exactly why he's doing all of this. He takes away the Sabbath canopy, which was a covered structure built at the temple, and he completely removes the outer royal entrance to the house of the Lord. Why? The text explicitly tells us, in deference to the king of Assyria. He is literally carving up the protective, sacred, and royal architecture of his own capital city purely to appease his foreign overlord. Every piece of bronze, every royal structure is altered to reflect his new, diminished status as a subservient vassal.
Finally, we reach the end of the historical narrative in verses 19 and 20. The text gives its standard closing, noting that the rest of the acts of Ahaz are written in the book of the Annals of the Kings of Judah. Then Ahaz rests with his fathers, meaning he passes away, and he's buried with them in the city of David. His 16-year reign comes to an end, and the chapter closes by simply stating that his son, Hezekiah, succeeded him as king.
Section 5, Practical Lessons and Takeaways.
So, what's the bottom line for us? When we look strictly at Ahaz's literal actions in this plain text, the lessons are incredibly relevant today. First, trading core values for short-term security is deeply destructive. Ahaz gave away the temple's holy gold just to buy temporary military safety from Assyria. Sure, he saved the city for a minute, but he totally bankrupted his nation's spiritual heart. Second, poor leadership ripples through an entire nation. Ahaz demanded an idolatrous altar, and the religious leader Urijah just folded without a single word of protest. When leaders compromise, it gives an unspoken permission for the entire society to follow suit. And finally, yielding to negative external influences compromises your identity. Ahaz was so desperate to please the king of Assyria that he literally dismantled his own holy sites. When we constantly seek approval from the wrong sources, we end up tearing apart the very things that make us who we are.
Let's wrap things up with Section 6, Chapter Recap and Conclusion.
To quickly summarize, Chapter 16 of 2 Kings gives us the deeply tragic history of King Ahaz. Here was a ruler who faced intense military pressure and chose to survive by completely submitting to Assyria, plundering the temple's sacred wealth and replacing God's holy altar with a foreign replica, forever altering the spiritual landscape of Jerusalem. It really leaves us with a provocative question. What core values are we tempted to dismantle today just to appease the pressures of our own modern world? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.